You know, the Montreal Alouettes weren't the team of the decade in the CFL, but they came friggin' close, winning titles in 70, 74, and 77, making the Grey Cup finals in 75, 78, and 79. Only the Eskimos were a little bit better. But what happened after these glory years into the early 1980s when Nelson Scalabania took over? It was a nightmare walking and bullshit talking. Now, when Montreal moved to the Olympic Stadium midway through the 76 season, they had some great attendance figures and again won the Grey Cup in 77. Now, they were very successful both on and off the field, winning the Grey Cup at their home field in front of nearly 70,000 fans, and they also averaged 60,000 fans per game at the Big O during the regular season, which was a league record like the Grey Cup was. However, the success ended with retirement of several key players in 1981. The owner of the team sold the squad to Vancouver businessman Nelson Scalabania. Now, the flamboyant Scalabania set about signing 2 first-round draft picks from the 81 NFL draft, and NFL named players such as Vince Ferragamo, James Scott, David Overstreet, Keith Gary, and Billy White Shoes Johnson. Even with all that talent, the Alouettes suffered on the field, finishing with a 3-13 record. Now, they did make the playoffs because it was so weak. They finished third in the East ahead of the Toronto Argonauts. They played Ottawa in the East Division playoffs, losing 2016, and Ottawa almost knocked off Edmonton in the finals. Now, this would be the last game that the original Alouettes franchise would play. Scalabania was reported late in 81 to be selling to oil magnate Pat Bolin, who would later buy the NFL Denver Broncos in 84. Now, later in 81, NFL coach George Allen of Washington Redskins fame obtained an option to purchase 51% of the club and was named Alouettes president. Now, while holding both the option and the post, he was surprised by Scalabania arranging a sale of the same controlling stake to Harry Orness, who would later own the St. Louis Blues and the Toronto Argonauts. Orness was reluctant to take control of the Alouettes as a result of the team's high level of debt and extensive commitments to high-profile stars. Now, in early April 82, Allen looked set to take control of the Alouettes. However, Allen left the club in late April after Scalabania was unable to resolve 1981 debts. With the franchising collapse, Berger tried to force Scalabania to relinquish the team to him as payment for a debt, Berger being the previous owner. Now, Scalabania returned from a business trip to Hong Kong in late April and was able to regain control of the team. However, Scalabania's highly leveraged business interests collapsed a month later. Unable to meet his obligations, he was forced to return the team to the league on May 13th. Now, the CFL anticipated the collapse of the Alouettes and was well prepared when Scalabania returned the franchise to the league. Among potential suitors for the troubled franchise was Montreal businessman Charles Bronfman, founder and owner of the Alouettes co-attendants at the Big O of the Montreal Expos. Now, Bronfman had made it clear to league officials that he would deal with Scalabania, but would be willing to establish a replacement franchise on short notice if the Alouettes ceased operations. On May 14, 82, a day after the original Alouettes franchise folded, the CFL granted the Montreal franchise rights to Bronfman. However, Scalabania continued to assert ownership of the Alouettes name, logos, and related intellectual property, even though he had given up the franchise. Now, rather than risk a lawsuit from the notorious litigious Scalabania and unwilling to negotiate with him, Bronfman chose to operate his team under another aviation-inspired nickname, the Concordes. The new name was not only a reference to the then revolutionary Concorde supersonic passenger jet, but appeared to be an appeal to both Anglophones and Francophones. Concorde was an Anglo-French joint venture. Unfortunately, the new nickname angered management at one of Montreal's most prominent corporations, aviation manufacturer Bombardier. After being a prominent sponsor of the Alouettes, Bombardier refused to have anything to do with a football team named for an aircraft built by one of his competitors, the now-defunct French-based Aerospatiale. Now, the Concordes inherited the franchise history and records of the 46-81 Alouettes. Bronfman retained much of the Alouettes coaching staff, including head coach Joe Galat and most of the Alouettes front office personnel. Now, the retained rights, CFL rights of all Alouettes players, and an effort to bring the team's expenses under control, former FNF players signed by Scalabinia's Alouettes were released. While many players returned to the U.S., one factor working in Bronfman's favor was that a player strike was looming in the NFL, which helped persuade star quarterback Johnny Evans and a few other Scalabania signees to stay in Montreal. Now, the Concordes had a terrible season. They went 2-14, the worst record in franchise history. The only upswing was quarterback Luc Tousignant, who was the only Quebec quarterback to start in that CFL game besides Jerry DeTilio. Now, David Overstreet was there, who got 190 yards in 6 games. Other stars in the club, including Johnny Evans, Turner Gill, Nick Araki, Lester Brown, Brian DeRue, Denny Ferdinand, a local kick returner, defensive tackle Glenn Weir, Preston Young, Gordy Judges, Don Sweet, and William Hanton. Now, over the next 3 years, the Concordes got better. They won 5 games in 83, and they were still in playoff contention the final weekend. Now, they almost made the playoffs again, but tied 21-21 against Hamilton, who were knocked out of the playoffs because Hamilton had a better head-to-head record. Now, the team returned to playoffs in 84, again doing so in a weak division. Now, they advanced all the way to the East Finals. Now 84 and 85 were the only playoff appearance for a Montreal football team from 82 to 86. Now, they made the playoffs again in the weak division, and the Concord with an 8-8 record, with the Ticats winning division title by sweeping the series. Now, unfortunately, attendance did not keep pace with performance. The Concorde's 83 season finale against Hamilton was the only game to attract a crowd, surpassing over 30,000 under Bronfman's ownership. Moreover, the 85 East semifinal was a disaster in the box office, due in part to poor weather conditions and haphazard facility preparations. Only 11,000 fans showed up. And this was the last game played under the Concorde's nickname, the last home game. Now, after quietly coming to terms with Scalabania, in 86 the team attempted to embrace its predecessor's history and regenerate flagging fan interest by rebranding itself to New Montreal Alouettes. This would not prove to be successful, both on and off the field. Now, they went 4-14, missing the playoffs, in spite of once again finishing third in the East on account of the new crossover rule the CFL had implemented for the 86 season. Off the field, financial losses mounted, and the team's attendance tumbled to 10,000 a game, including 9,045 at their final home game. Now, a contest against the Lions drew only 5,200 fans, the smallest crowd at any CFL game since '51. Now, just before the 87 season, Carl O'Keefe Brewery tore up its deal to serve as the CFL's presenting television sponsor. The collapse of the CFL's television deal proved a death blow for the Alouettes. The franchise had lost at least $15 million under Bronfman's ownership. While Bronfman was far better financed than Scalabania, he was unwilling to spend millions of dollars underwriting his professional sports holdings indefinitely. Now, Bronfman's overall situation was not helped by the then emerging news that the other professional sports team, the Expos, were at the center of a massive collusion scandal that was rocking MLB. Eventually, Bronfman decided to focus on baseball and made it clear he would not field a football team for the 87 season unless the Alouettes sold thousands of additional season tickets. Neither the necessary season ticket sales nor a viable ownership group willing to take the franchise off Bronfman's hands materialized. Relocation was not an option either, although several Canadian cities had expressed interest in acquiring a CFL team. But none of the prospective candidates that were potentially large enough to support a team had a stadium that was suitable even for temporary use. At the time, the CFL was lukewarm to the possibility of expanding to the U.S., which, of course, occurred 6 years later. Now, the new Alouettes folded on June 24th, 87, just a day before the season started. The league had been prepared for this and immediately released a previously drafted 8-team schedule. However, the Alouettes' demise came so late that the June 28th Washington Post still announced an ESPN broadcast of an Alouettes Stampeders game because CFL was being shown on ESPN. Now, the team did play both of its 2 preseason games on the road before folding. To balance out the divisions, the easternmost Western Division team, the Blue Bombers, moved to the east to take the Alouettes' place. Along with this, the crossover rule for the playoffs was scrapped until '97. The CFL had a dispersal draft for the Alouettes players, Some of the players left out of work by the team's demise eventually played in the NFL as replacement players during another player strike later that year. During the period that the Alouettes were inactive, professional gridiron football would return to Montreal in the form of the World League of American Football's Montreal Machine, who played 2 seasons in 91-92 under American rules. So, Alouettes, Concordes, Alouettes, of course, the Baltimore Stallions later on. We'll talk about that in a future podcast. But it was just a shit show. Scalabrini had no money, but he had ideas. Bronfman had money, but no ideas. So we went from, again, the number 1 CFL attendance franchise in the 1970s, pretty well from 76 on, to this shit show that basically ruined every fan of the Alouettes from Newfoundland to the Ontario border. Because the Montreal Alouettes at one time were just as popular as the Dallas Cowboys, San Francisco 49ers, Pittsburgh Steelers, because CFL games would be on a Saturday, NFL on a Sunday. That was the back-to-back we used to look forward to. So, ladies and gentlemen, if you like what we're doing here with our podcast, let us know with a like, comment, or subscribe. And I'm, as you can tell, I'm a big Montreal fan. And you know, one of our U.S. listeners was saying, I'm starting to learn more about the CFL because of these podcasts. Well, I'm not proud to say it, but if the Americans really knew how the CFL went on, they would have even took the USFL seriously under Donald Trump. Maybe what John Basson should have stepped in and took over the Alouettes, but he was too busy with the USFL. Because you know what a shit show that was. Anyway, thanks for listening, ladies and gentlemen. Bye.